My brother stood up at a family dinner and announced, "Mom and Dad signed over their house to me, so you need to leave." I was stunned until the lawyer smiled and said, "Actually, that's not what the contract says." When my brother read it, his face went white. I don't know how to start this except to say that I never expected my own brother to betray me like this. We've never been close, not since we were kids. He was always my parents' favorite. They never admitted it, but it was obvious in the way they treated us. He got new clothes, I got his hand-me-downs. He got a car on his 16th birthday, I had to save up for my own. He got his college tuition paid for, I had to take out loans. And the worst part? He always acted like he deserved it, like he was just naturally better than me. Still, I never thought he'd go this far. A few months ago, my parents decided they were getting too old to manage their house. It's the house we grew up in, a big place in a nice neighborhood just outside of Chicago. It wasn't a mansion, but it was worth a good chunk of money. They told us they wanted to pass it down while they were still alive, make things easier in the long run. I thought they meant both of us. Apparently, my brother had other plans. I should have known something was off when he started getting weirdly involved in my parents' finances. He started helping them with paperwork, running errands for them, acting like the perfect son. My parents, being who they are, ate it up. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured he was just trying to score more brownie points. Then came the family dinner. We were sitting at the table, me, my brother, my wife, my parents, and a few relatives, when my brother suddenly stands up, clears his throat, and says, "So, I wanted to let everyone know that Mom and Dad have officially signed the house over to me. Since I'm the new owner, we need to talk about what happens next." I swear, for a second, the whole room went silent. Then he looks directly at me and says, "Since this isn't your house anymore, you and your wife should start looking for a new place." I just stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. What? I finally managed. My brother sighed like he was talking to a child. "The house is mine now. Mom and Dad signed the deed over to me. You need to move out." I turned to my parents, expecting them to say something, but they wouldn't even look at me. My dad was suddenly very interested in his plate, and my mom was fiddling with her napkin. That's when it hit me they knew. They had agreed to this. My wife grabbed my hand under the table. She looked just as shocked as I was, but there was something else in her expression, calm. Almost like she knew something I didn't. That's when the lawyer cleared his throat. "Oh yeah, did I mention there was a lawyer at the table?" My brother had brought him, probably to make it all official. I hadn't paid much attention to him before, but now he was smiling. And not in a friendly way. "Actually," the lawyer said, pulling out a stack of papers, "that's not what the contract says." My brother frowned. "What are you talking about?" The lawyer slid the papers across the table. "Your parents did sign the house over, but not just to you. The deed is in both of your names. You and your brother own the house together." I swear, my brother's face went white. "No," he said, shaking his head. "That's not right. They were supposed to give it to me. That's what we agreed on." The lawyer shrugged. "Well, that's not what the paperwork says." I looked at my parents again, but they still wouldn't meet my eyes. My dad let out a long sigh and finally muttered, "We thought it would be better this way." Better for who? My brother snatched up the papers, flipping through them like he could somehow change what they said just by looking hard enough. His hands were actually shaking. I could see the exact moment he realized he'd been played. Now, here's the thing. I didn't know any of this before that dinner. I had no idea my parents had changed their minds, no idea they had put my name on the deed too. But my wife? She knew. Later that night, after we got home, she told me everything. She had a feeling my brother was up to something, so she did some digging. Turns out, he had been pressuring my parents for months to sign the house over to him alone. He had convinced them it was the smart thing to do, that he would take care of everything and make sure they were financially secure. But what he didn't tell them was that he was planning to sell the house as soon as he got the deed. That's right. He wasn't planning to live in it. He was going to sell it and keep every penny for himself. My wife, being the incredible woman she is, managed to get through to my parents before they signed anything. She made them see what my brother was really after. And at the last minute, they changed the paperwork. They didn't tell him because they knew he'd throw a fit. And oh, did he throw a fit. But here's where it gets interesting. You'd think, after realizing he didn't own the house outright, my brother would at least try to work something out. Maybe suggest selling it and splitting the money. Maybe offer to buy me out. Something. Nope. Instead, he doubled down. He started trying to force me out, turning our parents against me, spreading lies about my wife, even trying to change the locks on the house. Big mistake. Because here's the thing, if he wanted to play dirty, I was more than ready to fight back. And, unlike him, I actually had the law on my side. The fight for the house after that disastrous dinner, things went from bad to worse. My brother was furious. He stormed out that night, but the very next day, he started his campaign to get me out. First, it was small things, passive-aggressive texts, pretending I didn't exist whenever he talked to our parents, acting like he was the only real owner of the house. But then he got serious. I came home from work one day and found the front door locks had been changed. I stood there, confused, before trying my key again. Same thing. Wouldn't turn. That's when I heard a voice behind me. "You don't live here anymore." I turned around, and there he was, standing on the porch with his arms crossed like he was some kind of king. "What the hell did you do?" I asked. "I changed the locks," he said smugly. "My house. My rules." I laughed. Actually laughed. I think that threw him off. "You do realize I'm on the deed too, right?" I said. "You just illegally locked me out of my own house." His smirk faltered. "Just a little." "Well, I figured since you weren't living here, I am living here," I cut him off. "This is my house too." That's when he tried to change tactics. "Look, man, it just makes more sense for me to have the house. You and your wife can find another place. I'll even give you a little money to help with moving costs." I stared at him. He actually thought I was just going to roll over and let him win. "No," I said simply. That's when he lost it. "You're being selfish. You don't even need this house. I was the one who took care of Mom and Dad. I was the one who helped them with everything. I deserve this." "You weren't helping them," I shot back. "You were manipulating them." His face turned red. He clenched his fists, breathing hard, like he was barely holding himself together. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed inside, slamming the door in my face. I called the locksmith. By the end of the night, I had new locks again, and this time, I made sure he didn't have a key. The war begins after that. My brother got nasty. He started trying to turn our parents against me, telling them I was trying to steal the house from him. It almost worked too. Our mom called me, crying, begging me to just let it go and be the bigger person. I asked her one simple question. "Did you know he was planning to sell the house and keep all the money?" Silence. Then, a quiet no. "He wouldn't do that." "He would, and he was," I said. "You don't believe me? Ask him." That night she did. And I don't know exactly what he said to her, but after that, she stopped calling me about it. That didn't mean he gave up. Next, he started messing with me directly. He called the utility companies and tried to get my name removed from the bills. He told the neighbors I was squatting in his house. He even tried to have me served with an eviction notice, but since I was on the deed, that went nowhere. But the final straw? The thing that made me realize just how far he was willing to go? He trashed the house. The breaking point, I came home one evening and found the living room destroyed. Furniture flipped over, picture frames shattered, my things tossed everywhere. And the worst part? He was standing there in the middle of it, looking right at me, daring me to do something. "You don't belong here," he said. "This is my house." That was it. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just fight back. I had to end this. So I made a call. Not to the police. Not to my parents. But to someone who really knew how to handle people like him. The next morning, my brother woke up to a lawyer knocking on his door. And that's when everything changed. The trap when my brother opened the door that morning and saw the lawyer standing there, his cocky attitude cracked, just a little. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to sound in control. The lawyer smiled. "Actually, you can. I'm here to talk about the legal action being filed against you." My brother blinked. "Legal action? What the hell are you talking about?" The lawyer handed him an envelope. "This is a formal complaint for property damage, harassment, and unlawful eviction attempts. Also, you might want to check the part about financial misrepresentation." I saw the exact moment the words hit him. His face twitched, his breathing got uneven. He started flipping through the pages like he could somehow make them disappear just by looking at them. Then, he turned his glare on me. "You sued me?" I crossed my arms. "You trashed the house. You locked me out of my own property. You've been harassing me for weeks. What did you think was going to happen?" He looked back at the papers, and for the first time, I saw real panic in his eyes. "You can't do this," he muttered. "Mom and Dad won't let you." I shrugged. "They don't have a say in it. This is between us now." And that's when he did something really stupid. The fake loan scam, I thought. After getting slapped with a lawsuit, my brother would back off. Maybe try to negotiate, maybe even apologize, not because he meant it, but because he was losing. But no, he did the opposite. A week later, I got a letter in the mail that almost gave me a heart attack. It was a notice from a bank. A loan had been taken out against the house. A massive loan. And guess whose name was on it? Mine. My brother had forged my signature. I don't know how he did it, but I had a pretty good guess. He must have used old documents from when we were doing the house transfer and copied my signature onto the loan application. He must have figured, if he couldn't get me out, he could sink me financially. I drove straight to the bank, shaking with rage. It took a while to sort out, but once they pulled up the application and I proved I had never signed anything, the fraud department got involved fast. The bank officer looked pale when she realized what had happened. "This is serious," she said. "We'll need to open a full investigation." And just like that, my brother was in real trouble. The arrest I didn't tell him. I let him think his plan had worked. I let him celebrate. Then, 2 weeks later, he got a visit from the police. I wasn't there when it happened, but a neighbor told me later that my brother actually laughed when they showed up at the door. He thought they were there because of my lawsuit. He thought he could talk his way out of it. Then they slapped the handcuffs on him. That's when he realized this wasn't about me. This was bank fraud. He was being arrested on felony charges. The family fallout, my parents lost their minds. They called me, screaming, crying, demanding I fix this. My mom kept saying things like, "He didn't mean to," and "This is all a misunderstanding." I stayed calm. He forged my name. He tried to steal from me. This isn't a misunderstanding, this is a crime. My dad went quiet for a long time. Then he muttered, "But he's still your brother." I felt something snap inside me. "No," I said. He stopped being my brother the second he tried to ruin my life. My mom kept pleading, but I hung up. I was done. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. Because my brother? He wasn't going down without a fight. And the next move he made was unbelievable. The last betrayal, my brother getting arrested, should have been the end of it. I should have been able to move on, focus on rebuilding my life, and finally have peace. But people like my brother? They don't go down quietly. Even from jail, he found a way to stab me in the back one last time. 2 weeks after his arrest, I got a call from my mom. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to deal with her yet. But then my wife checked the messages and froze. "You need to hear this," she said, pressing play. My mother's voice came through, frantic and desperate. "He's getting out. The charges were dropped. He cut a deal. Please, please don't make this worse. He's learned his lesson. Just let him have the house." I felt my stomach drop. Let him have the house? I called my parents and my dad answered. He was quieter than usual, like he knew what was coming. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. He sighed. The bank decided not to press charges. I gripped the phone tighter. "Why?" "Because," he hesitated. "Because we paid them back. We took out a mortgage on the house to cover the debt. So it's done. It's over. He's not going to jail." I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. "You took out a mortgage?" I repeated. "On our house." "It's not a big deal," my dad said. "The house will still be his." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. They did it. They finally did it. They chose him. Again. The family showdown, I drove over there. I don't remember much of the ride. My wife wanted to come with me, but I told her no. This was something I had to do alone. When I got there, my parents were waiting for me in the living room. My brother was sitting smugly on the couch like he hadn't just tried to ruin my life. "Glad you finally came to your senses," he said. "You ready to sign the papers?" I stared at him. "What papers?" He smirked. "The ones that give up your half of the house. Since Mom and Dad took out the mortgage to cover your lawsuit, it's only fair you sign it over to me." I laughed. I actually laughed. I think that threw him off. "My lawsuit," I said. "You mean the one you caused? The one that exists because you committed fraud?" "Come on," he scoffed. "We're family. You're not really going to hold this against me, are you?" I turned to my parents. "Is this what you want?" I asked. "To put everything in his name? To hand over the house to him, even after everything he's done?" My mom wiped at her eyes. "It's just easier this way. We don't want any more fighting." I shook my head. "Easier for who?" Silence. My dad finally spoke. "He's our son too," he said. "He made a mistake, but we can't just throw him away." I felt my hands shake. "But you can throw me away?" My mother gasped. "Honey, no, that's not what we don't." My voice came out cold. "Don't lie to me. You made your choice. You always have." I turned to my brother. He was still smirking like he had one. "You want the house?" I said. "Fine, take it." I reached into my pocket, pulled out the keys, and threw them onto the table. "But don't call me when you lose it. Because you will lose it." Then, I walked out. The fallout, that was the last time I stepped foot in that house. A month later, my wife and I bought a new place, smaller, but ours. No shared ownership, no strings attached. I didn't go to family gatherings after that. At first, my parents called, begging me to come back, saying I was overreacting. But over time, the calls stopped. Then, a year later, I got a text from a cousin. "Did you hear about your brother?" I ignored it. Then another one came. "He lost the house." That got my attention. Turns out, my brother couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments my parents took out to save him. He thought he'd be able to handle it, but reality hit fast. He started missing payments, then defaulted. The bank took the house. My childhood home gone. And my brother? He had nothing. I wish I could say I felt bad. That I took the high road, forgave him, helped him get back on his feet. But I didn't. I just closed my phone and went back to my life. I don't know if my parents ever truly regretted their decision. Maybe deep down, they knew what they had done. Maybe they didn't care. But I do know one thing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left behind. I was free. And that was worth more than any house.